Hello, everyone, and we have a very interesting show today. It's really a lot on moral theology, but Father, why don't you outline the questions that we'll be answering today for you?
One we have coming in today is, do babies who pass away become angels?
Well, now that one would be more theological than it is moral, but continue.
Okay, another one we have, can priests administer the sacrament of confirmation?
Again, that's more sacramental. I'm sorry. I think it's more than the last two here.
Okay. The third one we have, if the mother and child lives are in danger, does the church value the child's life over the mother's?
Bingo. There, that's the one we were talking about.
That's what we're talking about.
Yes.
That wasn't necessarily the answer. And we have a question about the sacrament of confession,
which does imply morals.
Okay.
For all these questions to be answered, stay tuned.
Regina Caeli, laetare, Alleluia. Quia quem meruisti portare, Alleluia. Resurrexit, sicut dixit, Alleluia. Ora pro nobis Deum, Alleluia.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Web of Faith 2.1.5. This is our quarantine, or quarantine, I don't know. It's like Clementine edition of Web of Faith 2.0, which airs on EWTN on Saturdays at 11 p.m. My name is Father Kenneth Briganti, pastor of St. Magdalene's in Flemington. For those of you that are watching us by YouTube and are not from our parish, and I'm joined by my illustrious colleague,
Father John Trujillo, Diocese of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and Director of Pastoral Formation in Emmitsburg, Maryland.
And a co-author and co-host, too. So,
co-quarantine prisoner.
There we are. We're with Father Matthew Marinelli. We're quarantined together. We would like to, first of all, ask you to please continue to send your questions in. A whole slew of them came in yesterday and today, so that's great. So we'll be answering them during the rest of this week. And if you have a question that you've always wanted to ask a priest but never had time to because you might be rushing out to the car to get into to the parking lot to get going, here's your chance. There is an email address, and you can address your question. We just ask for you to not to be a personal question, but rather a theological, doctrinal, liturgical, scriptural, canonical. It could be applied to someone. That's fine. But you can send that in to that address. So without further ado, let's start answering some of these great questions that people wrote in.
Okay, we have one here for you, Father Ken.
Just one?
Well, one for right now.
Oh, okay, all right.
Don't jump the gun here. Most Reverend Fathers, been elevated. When my baby nephew died, family members told his mom he is now an angel. I know they meant well, but that is not that's not theologically accurate, is it? What should be said instead? And that's from Paulie.
Paulie, oftentimes we use different terms like love. I love to have a hamburger right now, or I love my dog, or I love my wife even, or I love God. Okay. That's one way we use the term love in many different ways. Well, oftentimes we use angel too. And like I said, oh, isn't she cute as an angel? And then grandma gives you a little pinch on the cheek, there and does that. Or what an angel for you for doing this for us. We often use that term, to mean something very endearing. However, you are right, Paulie. We should not use it in the theological sense, okay? God created in the order of creation this way. Angels, of course, are the highest of his creation. They do not have a body and soul. They're just a total spirit. And then just below that are man. He created man in his own image and likeness by our will and our intellect. And then below that is created animals. Animals cannot think on their own. They can be trained, but they cannot think, and they do
Unless you
not.
have a cat.
Yeah, they can't train those. Yeah, they live by their own rules. Yes, but they do not have an everlasting soul or an immortal soul like a human being does. And then below that would be rocks and mineral, or I should say plants, and then below plants would be rocks and minerals. So that's the order of creation. So when a man, no matter how small or how big, dies, always remains a human being, okay? Because that's how you were created. And it would be degrading if we change one level in for another, almost like what the Hindus believe in reincarnation. No, God intended us, created our soul. He intended us to have a mission. And in this life, as we were given missions, some, as the psalmists say, could be up to 80 years, some very few. No matter what that span is, that's our mission here on life. And it's very tough when we bury a child, and we like to do all sorts of things to compensate our feelings for that. And that's why we often would give those angelic words to them. But they are not. They are created, and human dignity would say that they have a destiny of their own by their creation and their soul. So when they die, hopefully of course, a little baby, we know that there's innocence there, and especially when they're baptized, there's baptismal innocence, and we assume that baby goes right into heaven. There's all the other two baptisms, which I'll let Father John will tell you: baptism of desire and blood.
Yeah. So if someone dies and as an adult, or young adult, who wanted to be baptized but through no fault of their own didn't get there in time, say they were killed or got sick during the time of Roman persecution, the desire to be baptized is sufficient to be baptized, or they would have desired baptism. This is part of God's universal salvific will. But also there's baptism of blood. When you die for the faith, but you haven't yet been baptized by water, then you are baptized by the shedding of your blood. And now I know people often watch these movies, like It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart. It's a nice movie at Christmas time.
Right.
But in the movie, there's this crazy
Clarence.
idea that Clarence used to be a guy on earth, and he earns his wings to become an angel.
Especially when you hear a bell
Oh,
ring.
little Zuzu in her petals or something. Like every time teacher says when the bell rings, another angel gets his wings. That's nice, but that's schmaltz. It's not theologically accurate.
Now, schmaltz is Yiddish, okay, for those who do not know that, for adding and being thick
Yes.
in adjectives and descriptions and flowery, in other words.
So men do not become angels. Men hopefully become saints. So it'd be better to say, oh, your little Johnny or Susie must be a saint by now, particularly if they die before the age of reason, but they've been baptized. But, I know people mean well. They say, oh, and we do have Mass of the Angels. I think people misinterpret that too. Mass of the Angels does not mean that you're saying the Mass because the little kid has become an angel. It's that you're commending them to the angels.
Right.
Angels are escorting them into paradise. So,
Just like all of us are given at the moment of our conception a guardian angel, okay? Well, that guardian angel is with us for our whole life, and is not reassigned, to another human being. That guardian angel was assigned to you and uniquely. That's how much God thinks of us and how much he is very caring for us. As the psalmist or the Old Testament would say, he knows even the amount of hair that we have on our head. So that's how intimate he is with us. So to infer that this person doesn't become a person anymore and becomes an angel is really not showing the special dignity that we have in our own right as a creation.
and it denies the resurrection of the body. Angels do not have bodies. They will never have bodies. But human beings, when they die, there's that separation of body and soul. But we believe in the resurrection of the dead so that the bodies will be raised up, and those who are in heaven will have their body and souls in heaven, and those cooking in hell will have their body and soul united. But angels only are pure spirit. But again, like in cartoons, they depict people up in heaven like you're wearing this long white gown, you got these fluffy wings, you have a little halo over your head. Well, the halo is the only thing that is accurate in terms of Catholic art, because when you look at certain pictures, they have halos over it. That was a sign that the person is a saint. But the wing part, I don't know where they ever got that idea. It's not in the scriptures.
Well, I think they're trying to say that there's agility in heaven, I guess, or something. You know,
well, they have no bodies.
Yeah, so that's it's a way of expressing that. So, Paulie, we hope that answered your question, and everyone else who had that in their mind as well. Dear Father John, thank you so much for sharing all your wealth of knowledge with us here in Flemington. I have a question for you. I thought only bishops could ordain and confirm, yet I'm a sponsor for my best friend's daughter, and the pastor confirmed, not the bishop. Was it valid? Does she need to be reconfirmed? Sally from Flemington.
Sally.
So obviously it wasn't a confirmation here because we've been blessed to have our bishop every time.
Yes, you've been.
So it must be
blessed.
You must have been a god or a sponsor at another parish, and you probably outside our diocese because the bishop does most of all
maybe
of
in the
them.
past, maybe before you were here.
Oh, that's just true.
Could have been a previous bishop, but it's a good question because the normal ordinary minister for a confirmation is the bishop. Now, only bishops can ordain. Bishops are the normal ordinary minister for confirmation, but under the RCIA program, when an adult is being baptized at the Easter Vigil or some other time in the year, then the priest who is bringing them into the church and is baptizing them can also confirm them. And that's been delegated to them by the Universal Church. Also, if a baptized Protestant is coming into full communion, they will be confirmed by the priest at the Easter Vigil or some other time. Now, in some cases, bishops are just unable to make all the different parishes, so they can delegate the power to confirm to the pastor or to the dean. And although I was a pastor for 16 years, I never had that privilege, but I was always happy that the bishop was able to make it because people want to see their bishop.
Right.
But if you're ordained, or if you're confirmed by the pastor, he's got delegation. It's valid. It's licit. It's like getting communion from the Holy Father. It's no more communion than if you got Holy Communion from a priest or a deacon. But the bishop, who is the pastor of the whole diocese, of course, the people would like to see him there. But like I said, we've had bishops who were sick, or it's just too large a diocese, and they don't have any auxiliaries or visiting neighboring bishops that could help out. So if there's delegation, then you have nothing to worry about. So I don't think she needs to be, as Lou Monte would say, reconfirmed.
Right. Well, and also another example of a pastor confirming would be adults coming in for confirmation. And throughout the year, there's these little confirmation programs that a parish will run, and they would then the pastor would write in for permission with the names, and the bishop would then delegate that pastor to do adult confirmation. Usually, although this year it's a little bit different, would be on Pentecost Sunday. We try to do that. Another time, and a priest doesn't need, if I'm correct, delegation, is in periculi mortis, which means in the danger of death. If a person was not confirmed or baptized, being received in, so to speak, he could be baptized, confirmed, receive First Holy Communion and all that. And let's say the person lived after, well, it was still valid because at the moment of the time, the person was, in danger of death. So he didn't, the priest didn't at that moment need a delegation, to do the confirmation. But now in this quarantine, a lot of standard confirmations that were done by the bishop have been canceled. So I could see, in order to catch up, in the fall, so that when the spring comes around next year, we're on target, that I could see the bishop delegating, priests to be doing confirmation. Maybe it's the Episcopal vicar for that county, or the dean of the deanery. Deanery has 13, or so many parishes are under a dean, and all that. And so maybe special permission will be given in the future. And so you might see more priests be doing confirmation only because of the the extraordinary events that we've been
the sheer
in.
volume of
In fact, our confirmation, which was supposed to be the 28th of or the 26th of May, has been postponed, and we did not receive a new date. So, could very well here at St. Mary Magdalene de Pazzi that the bishop give me permission to do the confirmation for the teenagers. However, I'm hoping that the bishop would come because, again, it's so nice to see the fullness of the priesthood, the head of our diocese, and here, and the people really look forward to seeing their bishop. So we're hoping that would not be the case. But nevertheless, if there's proper delegation given, it is valid.
Yes. I did one confirmation outside of the RCIA. There was a young man getting married, and Cardinal Keeler at the time was the Bishop of Harrisburg, and he insisted that if a Catholic was getting married, that they be confirmed before they got married. So I was directed by the Vicar General to confirm this young man the night of their rehearsal. So that was my big thrill. I got to use the chrism oil and confirm him the day before he got married. Because back then, only the pastor did the confirmations at the RCIA. I was just a lowly parochial vicar back then. But it is something like Father Ken said, when the bishop comes, it's a big event for the parish because he's the pastor of the whole diocese. And, people want to see him and he wants to be with his people. But it happens sometimes because of necessity. So you don't have to worry about having her reconfirmed or anything.
Okay. Thank you, Sally.
All right. Let's see here. Father Ken, last year I was at a parish penance service for Advent, and there were 10 priests, but we were told to confess only one sin each. And we all did the act of contrition together, and we all got the same penance. I felt that was odd. What say you? From Sophie.
Well, Sophie, obviously the penance service was not here at St. Mary Magdalene de Pazzi because we don't operate that way. We often have, in Lent and Advent, 10 or 12 priests to hear confessions, but very different than the scenario you were explaining. First of all, it would be wrong and unjust and to tell a penitent to confess only one sin, because what if you have a few mortal sins on your soul and you're only going to confess one? Well, that invalidates it because you didn't confess all of your mortal sins. Second of all, there with 10 priests there. And there's never a moment that you need to worry about that there's not going to be enough time to hear confessions. Now, the other thing about communal act of contrition, that would not invalidate it per se. I know a lot of parishes do that for their CCD classes. They do it for First Communion classes and things of that nature. Usually, even they can do it in a penance service for adult confirmation. I don't particularly care for that because I think it's nice when the penitent expresses his or her sorrow in front of priest who is acting in the name of Christ, right, in persona Christi, and it really shows their sorrow. So even with the youngsters, we here at St. Mary Magdalene de Pazzi have the children from second grade on up say their act in contrition in front of the priest. Two things. Number one, we can actually see that that they're expressing their sorrow, but two, they're practicing their act of contrition. Because if they don't do it at that moment, they may what happens when they do go into a confessional and the priest does ask them and there might not be a paper or anything around, they didn't have the history of doing that. So to me, that's very lazy and sloppy. And there's really no call because normally you get enough priests to hear confessions even for CCD or Catholic school. So the little extra time to, the 25 seconds to say the act of contrition in front of the priest is not going to break the deal there. But it doesn't invalidate that. That's something that you can do. Now, the giving of the same penance, I do find that odd because unless the pastor says that's the only penance you're going to give, but the penance has to fit, so to speak, the crime, all right? Or the penance has to sort of fit the sin.
Or the medicine fits the patient.
Much better. Okay, that's more pastoral. All right. But, so I find that very odd because, again, I think they want to cheapen on the old family recipe and we shouldn't do that. First of all, the sacrament of penance in the last 50 years has gone through so many problems as it is by the fact that there's so low attendance and coming to confession. So certainly we want to instruct the people and to do the correct way of doing the sacrament penance, whether if it's regular weekly confession or weekday confession or the special penance services or what have you. Now, Father, why don't you tell us about a big no-no called general confession?
Yes.
And I do say that not in this time of quarantine,
Yes.
but
Well,
outside
when you
that.
look in the ritual for the sacrament of penance, there's 3 legitimate ways of celebrating the sacrament. One is the most common. It's private auricular confession, where you go one-to-one with the priest in the confessional. You tell your sins, he gives you absolution, and you do your penance. The second one is a communal celebration, like Father Ken mentioned, usually in Advent and Lent, where you have a number of priests. Everybody goes individually to confess all their known mortal sins that
Yes,
have never been
there's not
previously
an
confessed.
express line just for one sin only.
So
That's
10 or
very
less or
bad.
anything like that, because that's what we call an integral confession. You must tell all mortal sins committed since the last confession. Okay, that's the other way, the communal. The third way is general absolution, which is only in emergency and only with the permission of the bishop. And a lot of people don't know or don't remember is that when you get general absolution, although not everybody goes to confession individually, you must go the first chance you get normally, and you must confess the sins you would have confessed. So, for instance, the only time I knew of this that was legitimate was in Pennsylvania, Diocese of Harrisburg, when 3 Mile Island was suspected of maybe blowing up and there'd be a nuclear incident. The people in Harrisburg and Middletown, Bishop gave permission for general absolution, where the pastor had the people come into church, and there was a whole slew of people in there. There's no way he could have heard all of them because they were getting out of Dodge at that moment. Okay?
Yeah, really.
So he gave general absolution.
Well, what was it? The governor said, "There's not an emergency
Not
here,
emergency, but if you're pregnant, get out.
get out." So,
So that stoked the flame, so to speak. So what he did was he gave absolution, which if between then and the first chance they got to go to confession, if somebody, God forbid, died, they would have been in the state of grace.
and I could also see in battle a chaplain.
Chaplains, yes. Going to war.
Soldiers are going out in the
Yes,
field.
that is absolutely
Bombs
correct,
are going
Father,
around,
yes.
and the priest can certainly can
Yes,
give
absolutely.
general absolution. And then again, hopefully, they all come back safely.
Yeah.
And if they had committed any serious sin, then they can go to
Now,
individual
I did hear,
confession.
and I haven't corroborated this, that a few priests did give general absolution in some nursing homes.
Right.
Because it just wasn't, they weren't able to get to all the rooms. But
And that was given because the bishop gave permission
yes, the bishop
during the
must
quarantine.
give permission for that. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Now, what cannot be done is just that the priest didn't schedule properly, or he's just too tired. He says, "Oh, there's so many people here. I'll be here for hours," because Padre Pio, St. John Vianney will be in the confessional for hours on end. So you can't just say for the convenience of the priest. But when it's absolutely impossible,
Plane is going down.
exactly.
You
You're on
know.
a plane. In fact, I think a friend of ours was on a plane once, and they thought they were going to go and crash. And somebody screamed, "He's a priest! He's a priest!" Well, back then they respected you, so they asked him to give general absolution. Today they might throw you off the plane. They're thinking that might help, but general absolution is only under those provisions. And like I said, you must go your first chance after receiving that general absolution. But it's not something that can be done too capriciously. And I know some parishes did that. Now, I was in a place, Father Ken, I don't know if I remember telling you this. The pastor didn't want to give kids their first confession before First Communion, although that's what the Code of Canon Law mandates.
Big
So what
no-no.
he did was he had the kids come in and just say, "I'm sorry," but they didn't tell you any sins.
So that's almost like a simulation of a sacrament.
It was a fake sacrament. And then the following year, after they received their first communion, they would make their first technical
So is that
confession.
priest still a pastor, or
He is no longer a pastor now.
I wouldn't think
And,
so. I think
that, that is a sacrilege, because you're pretending to celebrate a sacrament. Now, canon law makes it very clear that first confession must come before First Holy Communion. Now, whether or not confirmation comes after communion depends on your bishop and your diocese, but confession must precede communion.
So anyway, so I hope, Sophie, that answered your question on confession, and know that there's still, even in quarantine, opportunities, at least here in St. Magdalene's, to go to confession, but at many parishes around us too. So you just have to check your different parish websites for times for confession. Okay, dear Father Ken, Father Matt, Father John, but my question is to you, Father John. You are a blessing to our parish. Oh, aren't you, Father?
yeah.
Oh, we're just going to put a big bow on him. He's such a gift for us, right?
They need help.
All right. Great homilies all around. The church looks great too. Thanks for making it more Catholic. My question is, does the Catholic Church say that the doctor must opt for the unborn baby if both the mother and child are in danger of death when she is pregnant? Seems unfair to me. Rocco. Now, Rocco, this sounds a little bit like the movie scene from The Cardinal, which dealt with a little bit of
Yes,
that. Yeah.
yes, and of course we're dating ourselves.
Yeah, but it's
Point.
still out
an
there.
excellent movie.
movie. It usually comes out around Easter time.
No,
Yeah.
that was a highlight for seminarians. I'm glad you asked that question because in moral theology, all right, we take the principle that from St. Paul's own mouth and from the natural moral law, the ends never justifies the means. So the doctor can never, ever directly kill either the baby or the mother to save the life of either one.
Father, can I just pause you right there? Pause. Do the principle of double effect, because you're giving a little bit of it now. Just to give
after I explain this a little bit further.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, unpause.
Okay. So the thing is that the church doesn't say the baby has more value than the mother or the mother has more value than the baby. That's why the baby can never be killed to save the life of the mother, which sometimes people present. Now, doctors, friends of mine, I know several of them that are very highly experienced, say there's never been a case where the baby would have to be, or medically would be in a position where killing the baby has to be the way to save the mother. Now, it may be a convenient way from someone's perspective, but it's never a necessity. So that what can be done and should be done is that you try to save both and you do whatever you can. Now, if the baby dies naturally or the mother dies naturally, that's a consequence of the situation. That's not considered a killing or murder. But when you directly go in and kill the baby or kill the mother, now, as I mentioned, the principle of double effect, that's a way of looking at things and applying the natural moral law, which everybody knows, regardless of your religion. You have the reason you should know the natural moral law, which is basic ethics.
So let's go. What's the first principle?
So first thing you have to do is make sure that the act itself that you're going to do is not intrinsically immoral. So obviously, killing the baby would already throw that out of the case. Okay. So let's give the most typical example: an ectopic pregnancy. The egg got fertilized and is attached to the fallopian tube, and it's not where it should be. Okay. So you can't go in and kill the baby directly. You can remove, all right, the fallopian tubes with the embryo attached, but as long as you keep the embryo intact, and then what happens is the baby dies naturally. Just like if a baby's born premature, you do what you can, but if the baby dies because it's just too premature, you didn't cause the death. Death was a consequence of the situation. Whereas if you go in with instruments or a fluid and you cause the death, that violates. So it has to be not intrinsically evil. Two, it cannot flow from the immoral act itself. Okay, so that this cannot be a direct consequence of the act that you do. So for instance, if you go and stick a knife in there, okay,
right,
you may say, well, my intent wasn't to kill the baby, but that's what happened. All right, that's a consequence of that immoral act. Okay, there must be a proportionality. Okay, so that the whatever suffering or evil is tolerated, because again, you can never intend evil, but evil can be tolerated if it's unavoidable. So that there must be a proportion, that the proportionate good outweighs the proportionate evil. And then the fourth thing is that when these things, when this is about to be done, okay, that the intent and all the procedures that are done are there for the ultimate good. The ultimate good is to preserve life. And if you do anything to say, well, we're looking at convenience, no. Even if it's to alleviate suffering, life trumps everything. So that if you can save the baby and save the mother, that should be your ultimate goal. If you can only save one, you don't kill one to save the other. So the common good would be is you save who can be saved and proportionally as best you can. Now, obviously, We just celebrated the feast of Saint Gianna Molla. Here's a case where she was pregnant, all right, and she had a couple of miscarriages before that, and the doctor said, "Why don't you terminate the pregnancy?" which would be immoral to do. But she had the baby, her daughter Gianna, and then she died afterwards.
A week later, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was an application of the principle of double effect, because now what if she had a heart attack while she's pregnant? You can do open heart surgery if you know that the baby, she's going to go into labor. Baby's born naturally, but the baby dies because the baby's premature. You did not directly cause the death. You worked on the mother because if she had the heart attack and died, the baby would have died instantly anyway. But if you open her heart, she's going to go into labor. You save the baby as best you can, and the baby dies naturally, as opposed to going in, killing the baby, and then removing the remains. That would be a violation.
Now, Father John, unfortunately, we have to remove ourselves.
Ooh.
We're at an end of another episode. But thank you for that. And maybe we should pick up with that because proportionalism is different than what you're talking about. And that would
Yes,
be
I was talking about proportionality.
yeah,
and proportionalism,
but we should probably discuss that at another time. And but anyways, thank you for tuning in, and thank you for your generous continued your generosity in giving either the traditional way by your envelopes, dropping them off, or mailing them in. Electronic giving, which you can sign up now, and Regina Epperschein in our business office will be happy to help you and walk you through that. And then PayPal or texting is another way to do that. Whatever you do, we count on your donations to the parish to keep us going. So please continue to do so that when we finish quarantine, we'll be up and running to serve all your spiritual needs as the best way we can. So as we come to a conclusion, we'd like to thank Father Matthew for producing and editing, and also our sound director and of our series here. So we thank him for that. And Father, let's give the people our priestly blessing. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
May Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God bless you until we see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Queen of heaven, rejoice. Alleluia. Alleluia. Come on. For he whom thou didst bear. Alleluia. Alleluia. Has risen as he said.